The official story of Trevor Gibbs is a study in quiet evaporation. On the night of October 22nd, 1998, the 42-year-old shift supervisor, a man known for his rigid adherence to safety protocols, told a colleague he was heading to the break room. He was never seen again. The initial police report paints a picture of frustrating normalcy. His car was untouched in the employee lot. His half-finished coffee sat cooling on his desk, and not a single camera or witness saw him leave the sprawling Minneapolis woodworking facility. With no signs of a struggle and no body, the investigation settled on two convenient, if unsupported, theories. Either Gibbs, a seemingly stable family man, was secretly drowning in debt and orchestrated his own disappearance, or he had fallen victim to foul play somewhere beyond the factory gates. The facility was searched and cleared. The case went cold, hardening into a piece of local folklore, the story of the man who simply walked away from his life. It was a narrative tidy enough to close the file, a mystery relegated to the realm of personal secrets and external evils. For over a quarter of a century, that was the accepted truth. A man vanished, and the building he vanished from was considered merely the last place he was seen. The entire official conclusion was built on one unproven assumption, that he had somehow, invisibly, made it outside. No one in an official capacity ever seriously considered the most disturbing possibility. What if he never left? For 26 years, the story remained frozen in time. Then, in May of 2024, the monolith began to crack. The old woodworking facility, long since abandoned, was being demolished. A crew was tasked with dismantling a massive rusted cyclone dust collector, a steel silo that had once filtered tons of sawdust from the factory's air. As a plasma torch cut through the main chamber, the workers found something that wasn't supposed to be there, buried beneath decades of hardened, resin-infused wood dust. The skeletal remains of a man still dressed in the tattered shreds of a 1998 work uniform. Dental records quickly confirmed the impossible. This was Trevor Gibbs. The man who had supposedly walked away from his life had been inside the factory all along. But it was a small, poignant discovery in his corroded shirt pocket that truly shattered the official narrative. Perfectly preserved was a crisp, laminated ticket for Game 6 of the 1998 World Series, dated for the day after he disappeared. This was not the artifact of a man planning to flee his debts or abandon his family. It was a ticket to a future, a simple plan for a father and son to see a ball game. The discovery of a body turns a cold case hot, but the discovery of that ticket turned a convenient lie into an undeniable homicide. The official story claimed Gibbs had left the building. The truth was that the building itself had become his tomb. This raises the immediate, unavoidable question. If Trevor Gibbs never walked out the factory door, then who inside those walls made sure he would never leave? The lie that buried Trevor Gibbs wasn't forged in the halls of power. It was a crude, desperate fabrication constructed by men who wore the same work boots he did. To understand why the truth was hidden, we must look not at the state, but at the mundane ecosystem of the factory floor in 1998, where ambition and greed could fester unnoticed in the hum of machinery. The architects of this lie were not faceless officials, they were hiding in plain sight. The primary architect was a man named Elijah Hummel. In 1998, he was a quiet, 52-year-old maintenance worker, a fixture of the night shift. To his colleagues, he was slow but dependable, a man who kept to himself, the kind of overlooked employee who fades into the background. This persona was his greatest asset, a perfect camouflage for the operation he was running. Beneath this veneer of harmless mediocrity, Hummel operated a surprisingly sophisticated theft ring. For years, he had been systematically stealing high-grade lumber and expensive equipment, funneling it onto the black market. He knew the factory's blind spots, the loopholes in inventory, and the maintenance schedules that could cover the disappearance of valuable assets. It was a lucrative, low-risk enterprise that relied on one thing: no one paying too close attention. The problem for Elijah Hummel was that Trevor Gibbs paid attention to everything. As a shift supervisor, Gibbs was a stickler for the rules. He had begun noticing things, inventory logs that didn't add up, expensive tools that went missing for repairs and never returned. His meticulous nature, the very quality that made him a good supervisor, was like a spotlight slowly swinging towards Hummel's entire operation. Gibbs wasn't looking for a crime. He was simply doing his job. And in doing so, he was on the verge of exposing everything. Hummel was not working alone. He had an accomplice, a younger, easily intimidated forklift operator named Marcus Cole. Cole was roped in with promises of easy money, a way to supplement a meager factory paycheck. He wasn't the mastermind. He was the muscle and the lookout, a pawn whose silence was secured through a mixture of greed and fear. Their motive was brutally simple: self-preservation. Trevor Gibbs wasn't killed out of hatred. He was eliminated like a line item in a ledger because his integrity had become a direct threat to their illicit income. The story of a man who simply walked away wasn't just a convenient theory for the police. It was the final crucial component of their crime, a fiction that allowed them to melt back into the anonymity of the factory floor. The discovery of Trevor Gibbs's remains did more than just solve a missing persons case. It triggered a forensic re-examination of the original investigation itself. Every conclusion from 1998, once accepted as fact, now had to be viewed through the lens of a confirmed homicide. The pillars supporting the official story were not just weak, they were deliberately constructed to mislead. First to crumble was the theory of voluntary disappearance. Law enforcement in 1998 floated the idea of hidden debts, a secret life. But the World Series ticket found in Gibbs's pocket was a powerful piece of counter-evidence. It represented a future plan, a small but significant promise to his son. This wasn't the memento of a man planning to vanish. It was the token of a father intending to come home. When viewed alongside his stable work history and strong family ties, the narrative of him abandoning his life becomes not just improbable, but psychologically incoherent. Next, the foundational assumption that he was a victim of foul play outside the factory is directly obliterated by the location of his body. But the new investigation, led by Detective Nina Bartlett, uncovered a far more damning detail. According to old factory schematics and maintenance logs, the specific cyclone dust collector where Gibbs was found was officially decommissioned and permanently sealed on October 23, 1998, the day after he disappeared. This was no random hiding place. The killer had a 24-hour window before their crime would be entombed in steel. This single fact acts like a key, unlocking the entire methodology of the murder. Such precise knowledge of a maintenance schedule was not available to the public, nor to the average factory worker. It pointed directly to someone with intimate access to the facility's operational plans. The suspect pool, once imagined to be the entire city of Minneapolis, was suddenly reduced to a very short list of employees. The original investigation's focus on external threats was a catastrophic misjudgment. Detective Bartlett then revisited a piece of evidence that had seemed helpful at the time: an anonymous tip. The 1998 case file showed that police had received a call suggesting they look into a local gang known for cargo theft. This tip successfully diverted crucial investigative resources, sending them on a wild goose chase that led nowhere. It was the perfect false trail, providing a plausible external enemy, while the real killer clocked in for their next shift. Digging deeper, Bartlett uncovered the origin of that call. It had been made from a payphone, a detail that made it untraceable in the 90s. But cross-referencing the payphone's location with the addresses of factory employees from that year revealed a startling coincidence. The payphone was located just 2 blocks from the then address of a maintenance worker named Elijah Hummel. What was once seen as a helpful tip now looked like a calculated act of misdirection. The dominoes fall in quick succession. The baseball ticket refutes the motive to flee. The body's location proves the crime was internal. The decommissioning schedule proves the killer was an insider with specific knowledge, and the anonymous tip proves that this insider actively manipulated the police. The official story of Trevor Gibbs's disappearance wasn't just wrong, it was a carefully constructed illusion designed by his killer to stand for decades. In any cold case, the paper trail of documents and evidence can only take you so far. To breathe life into the past, you need a human voice. For Detective Bartlett, the investigation led to one name that appeared on the 1998 night shift roster alongside Trevor Gibbs and Elijah Hummel, a young forklift operator named Marcus Cole. Finding him 26 years later was not difficult. He was a man in his late 50s, living a quiet, unremarkable life, as if deliberately trying to avoid attention. When Bartlett first approached him, the wall of denial went up instantly. It was a frantic, panicked rejection of everything, the reaction of a man not just hiding a crime, but reliving a deep-seated terror. He insisted he remembered nothing, saw nothing, and knew nothing. He stammered, his eyes wide with a fear that looked ancient, a fear that had clearly been a constant companion for over 2 decades. He was a man held prisoner by a secret. Instead of pressing him with threats of perjury or obstruction, Bartlett took a different approach. In the sterile quiet of an interview room, she simply slid a high-resolution photograph across the table. It was the World Series ticket, pristine and perfect against the backdrop of the tattered work shirt. She let him look at it, at the date, at the promise it held. Then, in a calm voice, she said, "His son never got to go to the game with his dad." That single sentence, an appeal not to his guilt, but to his humanity, did what 26 years of fear could not. Marcus Cole shattered. The carefully constructed dam of silence that had held for a generation burst, and the truth came flooding out in a torrent of choked sobs and half-finished sentences. His testimony, once he began, was the key that unlocked the final moments of Trevor Gibbs's life. In a formal recorded statement, Cole gave voice to the events of that night. He described how Trevor Gibbs, holding a logbook, had calmly confronted Elijah Hummel in the break room, not with an accusation, but with questions about inventory discrepancies. The argument escalated quickly. Hummel, realizing he was cornered, grabbed a heavy-duty wrench from a nearby toolbox. The violence was sudden, brutal, and shocking in its efficiency. A terrified Marcus was then forced to help move the body. He recounted how Hummel, with cold precision, explained his plan to use the soon-to-be-sealed dust collector. The lie was born in that moment, but it was a threat that ensured its longevity. Hummel looked the young forklift operator in the eye and calmly explained that if a single word was ever spoken, Marcus's own family would learn firsthand just how easy it was for people to disappear. For 26 years, that threat had been enough to guarantee his silence. Armed with the knowledge of the Cyclone Collector's decommissioning schedule, Detective Nina Bartlett's investigation took a logical, professional, and ultimately incorrect turn. The precision of the timing, killing a man and hiding his body in a location that would be permanently sealed just hours later, suggested a level of premeditation that seemed beyond a simple workplace squabble. All the evidence pointed to a calculated execution, not a crime of passion. Bartlett's initial theory was that Trevor Gibbs had uncovered a more significant white-collar crime. Perhaps he had stumbled upon corporate embezzlement or a systematic cover-up of safety violations by the plant's management. A manager or engineer would have had direct access to maintenance schedules and the authority to operate without suspicion. Following this trail, she began digging into the lives of the 1998 management team, building profiles of men who had long since retired or moved on. It was a convincing narrative, a brave supervisor silenced by powerful men protecting a corporate secret. While waiting on financial records and background checks for these former executives, Bartlett decided to tie up a loose end from the original case file. The anonymous 1998 tip that had sent police chasing after a local cargo theft gang. It was standard procedure, a box to be checked. She requested the location of the payphone from which the call was made, expecting it to be a dead end. The result, when it came back, didn't just create a new lead. It shattered her entire working theory. The payphone wasn't in an industrial area or near a known criminal hangout. It was on a quiet residential street corner. When she cross-referenced the location with the 1998 employee address list, the pin on the map didn't land near the affluent suburban home of a plant manager. It landed 2 blocks from the modest rented duplex of Elijah Hummel, the quiet, overlooked maintenance man. The revelation was jarring. The sophisticated misdirection she had attributed to a cunning executive was, in fact, the work of a low-level employee. The crime wasn't a top-down conspiracy. It was a bottom-up act of brutal preservation. Her investigation pivoted instantly away from the front office and back to the greasy, sawdust-covered reality of the factory floor. The killer wasn't a man in a suit. He was a man in overalls. The catalyst that finally illuminated the truth wasn't a dusty document or a forgotten piece of physical evidence. It was the living memory of a terrified man. Marcus Cole's full, recorded confession was the irrefutable proof that dissolved 26 years of lies and speculation. It provided not just a culprit, but a motive, a timeline, and a chillingly clear picture of Trevor Gibbs's final moments. According to Cole, the confrontation happened exactly as the evidence suggested, in the sterile quiet of the late-night break room. Trevor Gibbs, holding an inventory logbook, approached Elijah Hummel not with an accusation, but with the quiet, persistent questions of a man who knew the numbers didn't add up. He had found the pattern. He was asking Hummel to explain it. For Hummel, whose entire illicit enterprise was about to be unraveled by a supervisor simply doing his job, explanation was not an option. The argument escalated, and in a moment of cold panic, Hummel grabbed a heavy-duty wrench from a maintenance cart. The attack was swift and decisive. Cole's testimony provided the crucial context for every piece of the puzzle. The choice of the cyclone dust collector was no accident. Hummel, as a maintenance worker, knew its decommissioning was scheduled for the following day. He saw it not just as a hiding place, but as a permanent, steel-walled tomb. His knowledge of the factory's inner workings became his most valuable weapon in the cover-up. The anonymous tip to the police was also Hummel's invention. Cole confirmed that hours after the murder, Hummel drove to a payphone several blocks away and fed the police a fabricated story about a local cargo theft gang. It was a brilliant, low-tech act of misdirection that sent the initial investigation spiraling in the wrong direction, giving him the breathing room he needed. With Cole's confession, every scattered fact fell into its final, horrifying place. The decommission schedule was the key to the disposal. The payphone tip was the key to the misdirection. The logbook Gibbs was holding was the reason for his death. And the World Series ticket was the tragic symbol of the ordinary life he lost. There were no more inconsistencies, no more unanswered questions. The ghost of Trevor Gibbs finally had a voice, and it spoke of a simple, brutal truth. He was murdered for his diligence, silenced by a quiet maintenance man who had more to lose from an inventory check than anyone ever imagined. The legend, as we know, was one of quiet disappearance. A man walked towards the break room and simply vanished into the night. But based on the evidence and the confession of Marcus Cole, we can now reconstruct the brutal, hidden reality of what happened inside the factory on October 22, 1998. The truth is not a story of evaporation. It is a story of a violent, calculated erasure. The night shift was winding down. Trevor Gibbs, ever the diligent supervisor, was making his final rounds. In his hand, he carried a logbook containing the inconsistencies he could no longer ignore, discrepancies in lumber shipments, expensive equipment logged out for maintenance that never reappeared. He found Elijah Hummel in the break room. The confrontation began not with a shout, but with a question. Gibbs, pointing to a line in his log, calmly asked Hummel to account for the missing inventory. For Hummel, this was the moment his carefully constructed criminal enterprise collapsed. This quiet, rule-abiding supervisor had seen through the facade. Panic flared, followed by a cold, survivalist calculation. A maintenance cart stood nearby, and on it lay a heavy-duty wrench. The conversation ended abruptly. A tool for repair became a weapon of silencing. In the sterile quiet of the break room, Trevor Gibbs's meticulous record-keeping came to a violent end. What followed was not chaos, but a chillingly methodical cover-up. Hummel found Marcus Cole, and through a combination of threats and dominance, enlisted his terrified assistance. Hummel's panic had already cooled into a chilling pragmatism. As a maintenance worker, he knew the factory's secrets. He knew that the cyclone dust collector, Unit 4, was scheduled to be permanently sealed the very next day. It was the perfect tomb. Under the hum of the factory's remaining machinery, the two men moved the body. It was a grim, silent procession through the deserted corridors. They deposited the remains inside the vast steel chamber, a place where for years only sawdust and resin had settled. The final echoing clang of the access hatch being bolted shut was the true end of the story. Trevor Gibbs was gone. To complete the illusion, Hummel walked back to Gibbs's desk, leaving the half-full coffee cup as a piece of stagecraft, a prop to sell the story of a man who had simply stepped away for a moment. Later that night, he drove to a payphone and made the anonymous call that would send the police chasing ghosts. The fiction was complete. The truth of a workplace murder, born of greed and executed with cold precision, was buried under a convenient lie and 10 tons of compacted sawdust. Armed with a full confession, the Minneapolis Police Department moved quickly. They arrested Elijah Hummel, now a frail 78-year-old man, at his modest suburban home. The expectation was to find a man burdened by guilt, perhaps even relieved to be unburdened. Instead, they found a monster of chilling arrogance. In the interrogation room, Hummel showed no remorse. He boasted about his crime, expressing not guilt for the murder, but anger at being caught after so many years. He saw himself as the author of a perfect crime, undone by the foolish sentimentality of his former accomplice. The legal process, however, would be cut short. 2 months after his arrest, while awaiting trial, Elijah Hummel died of a massive heart attack in his jail cell. For the Gibbs family, it was a complex and unsatisfying end. They were denied the catharsis of a public trial and a formal conviction, but his death provided a final grim closure. The architect of their pain was gone. Marcus Cole, for his part, received a significantly reduced sentence for his cooperation. The justice system acknowledged that while he was an accomplice, he had also been a hostage to fear for 26 years. The revelation of the truth sent a shockwave through the community. The old, whispered folklore of the man who vanished was replaced by a more gruesome and compelling modern legend. The story of the supervisor murdered for his integrity and entombed in a steel silo. The media seized upon the poignant detail of the World Series ticket, turning it into a powerful symbol of a future stolen by banal greed. Trevor Gibbs was no longer a local mystery. He was a testament to the fact that evil can wear a mask of utter mediocrity. But the most profound impact was on the Gibbs family. For over a quarter of a century, they had lived with a dual burden, the grief of their loss and the quiet, insidious shame of the official narrative. The possibility that Trevor had chosen to leave them had always lingered, a poisonous whisper in the background of their lives. Now, that whisper was silenced forever. The truth, however brutal, was also a vindication. Their father and husband had not abandoned them. He was taken from them precisely because he was the man they always knew him to be, decent, diligent, and unwilling to look the other way. His name was finally cleared, his memory restored not as a mystery, but as a quiet hero of the factory floor. Today, If you were to look for the place where Trevor Gibbs lost his life, you would find nothing. The old woodworking facility has been completely demolished, its foundations ripped from the earth to make way for new development. The physical stage for this quarter-century-long tragedy has been erased from the Minneapolis landscape. There is no plaque on the wall, no monument at the site, because the site itself no longer exists. The only true memorial now resides in the quiet of a family home, where a pristine 1998 World Series ticket sits framed next to a photograph of a smiling father who was never able to use it. The story of Trevor Gibbs is a chilling lesson in the banality of evil and the simple mechanics of a convenient lie. The official narrative of a man who walked away from his life was accepted for so long, not because it was compelling, but because it was easy. It required no difficult questions and pointed no fingers inward. It allowed everyone to believe the darkness was somewhere else, outside the factory gates, rather than standing right there on the night shift, holding a wrench. It proves that the most effective camouflage for a monster is often a mask of utter mediocrity. But it also proves that lies, even those sealed in steel and buried for decades, have an expiration date. Time does not just obscure the past, it also weathers the containers built to hide it. For 26 years, the truth lay dormant, waiting for the walls to be torn down. The case of Trevor Gibbs is a stark reminder that you cannot compact a man's life into nothing. A secret, like a body, has weight. And eventually, the structure built to contain it will always collapse.